A grieving veteran stood before a crumbling hospital, left to him as an inheritance no one else wanted. Locals called it worthless, a burden better left to rot. But when his loyal dog began clawing at the walls, the truth buried inside would change everything, forever. James Walker had seen battlefields most men could never imagine. A decorated veteran, he carried medals of honor on his chest, but scars far deeper in his heart. The war had taken from him more than he could ever explain. Friends, brothers in arms, and the sense of belonging he once had all gone. At home, the silence was louder than any gunfire he'd heard overseas. His wife had passed years earlier, and the loneliness carved into him like a wound that refused to heal. Nights were restless, haunted by memories of war and the ghosts of those who never made it back. Then, one day a letter arrived. An inheritance notice. An old hospital, abandoned for decades, left in his name by a distant relative he barely remembered. Most would have sold it instantly. But for James, it felt like fate was calling him, though he didn't yet know why. When James arrived in the small mountain town to claim his inheritance, the locals couldn't hide their smirks. The hospital, they said, was a curse. Worthless, one shopkeeper muttered. Nothing but ghosts in there, another whispered. Their words lingered in the air like smoke, but James had learned long ago to ignore the noise of doubters. The hospital stood at the edge of the valley, swallowed by vines and shadow. Its windows were shattered, its walls cracked with age, as if nature itself had tried to erase its existence. To most, it was just an eyesore. To James, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. By his side patted Rex, his loyal German shepherd, a war companion who never left him. While the townsfolk shook their heads, James tightened his grip on the leash. The hospital wasn't just a building. It was the beginning of something he couldn't yet explain. The first time James stepped through the broken doors of the hospital, the air felt heavy, stale with decades of dust. His boots echoed against the cracked tiles, each step sounding like it didn't belong. Faded posters clung to the walls, their messages about health and hope now ghostly reminders of forgotten lives. Rex patted ahead, ears twitching at every creak. The dog's nails tapped against the floor, quickening whenever shadows shifted across the hallway. Rusted gurneys sat abandoned, wheels locked in place as if frozen in time. James brushed his hand across a counter, the dust coating his fingers like ash. Old patient files were scattered on the ground, their pages yellowed and brittle. He bent down to read a name, but stopped when he noticed something stranger. Family photos, left behind in one of the rooms, frames cracked, yet faces smiling through the glass. Rex growled suddenly, low and sharp, staring into a darkened corridor that stretched deeper into the hospital. James's throat tightened. There was no wind, no sound, yet the building felt alive, as if it had been waiting for him. And with each step forward, the mystery only grew darker. As James pushed deeper into the hospital, Rex's behavior grew stranger. The dog wasn't just cautious, he was fixated. His nose twitched, his tail stiff, every muscle on edge. Suddenly, Rex stopped in front of a sealed door at the far end of a hallway, his paws scraping against the wood. James tugged the leash gently. "Come on, boy," he whispered. But Rex refused to move. Instead, he growled, the sound low and warning, as if the door itself held a secret too dangerous to ignore. James knelt beside him, pressing his ear to the wall. Nothing, just silence. And yet, Rex's insistence unsettled him. Dogs didn't act like this without reason. He placed his hand against the door's surface. It was colder than the rest of the building, unnaturally so. Something was hidden there. Something Rex could sense long before James would ever see it. James hesitated, staring at the sealed door while Rex's claws scratched furiously against the wood. Finally, he grabbed a nearby metal rod and wedged it between the frame. The old hinges groaned, the sound echoing like a cry through the empty halls. With one last push, the door gave way. Behind it was not another hospital wing, but a narrow, hidden passage. The air that drifted out was stale, colder, and carried a faint metallic scent that made James's skin prickle. He shined his flashlight into the darkness, dust swirling like ghosts in the beam. Rex bounded forward, nose to the ground, tail rigid with purpose. The corridor sloped downward, leading into the heart of the building. James followed carefully, his boots crunching on debris. At the end, he found a heavy door bolted shut. After forcing it open, James froze. Inside were rows of crates stacked against the walls, covered in cobwebs and stamped with government seals. Rusted medical equipment surrounded them, and shelves sagged beneath old journals and files. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just an abandoned hospital. This was a secret someone had tried very hard to bury. James approached the nearest crate, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The wood was brittle, splintered by age, but the government stamp was still clear enough to read, "Property of U.S. Army Medical Corps." His stomach tightened. What was military cargo doing in an abandoned civilian hospital? He pried the lid open, dust exploding into the air. Inside lay rows of sealed vials, medical kits, and neatly packed surgical tools that looked untouched by time. Beneath them were envelopes marked confidential. James pulled one out, his hands shaking as he flipped through the pages. The words made his blood run cold. Classified notes about secret experiments, patients brought in under false names, and treatments that had never been approved. Rex whined, pawing at another crate. James opened it to find stacks of gold coins wrapped in military rations, as if hidden for safekeeping. He lifted one, its weight solid and undeniable. This wasn't a forgotten hospital. It had been a cover, a place where medicine, money, and secrets intertwined. And for decades, someone had gone to great lengths to make sure it stayed hidden. James's heart pounded as he knelt by the first crate, his flashlight casting long, trembling shadows. Across the dusty floor, he pried open the lid with the metal rod, the wood splitting apart with a sharp crack. Inside lay something he never expected: bundles of neatly wrapped medical supplies, untouched for decades. Syringes, sealed vials, and surgical instruments gleamed faintly, preserved as if waiting to be used. But that wasn't all. Beneath the supplies, James found folders stamped top secret. He flipped one open, and his chest tightened. The documents described patients brought here under false pretenses, soldiers, drifters, people no one would miss. Experiments had been performed, their outcomes carefully logged and hidden away. Rex growled again, pawing at another crate. James forced it open and froze. Inside were heavy sacks filled with gold coins, tarnished but unmistakably real. His breath caught in his throat. The hospital wasn't abandoned because it failed. It had been silenced. A place where power, money, and human lives had been traded in the shadows. And now, for the first time in decades, its truth had come clawing back into the light. James sank onto a broken chair, the weight of what he had uncovered pressing down harder than any battlefield memory. For years, he had searched for meaning, for a reason why fate had spared him when so many of his brothers in arms never made it home. Now, staring at the evidence of suffering hidden within these walls, he felt the same ache of loss return. Rex rested his head gently on James's knee, his steady eyes grounding him. In that quiet moment, James realized this wasn't about wealth or secrets. It was about lives, voices that had been stolen and buried. His inheritance wasn't a curse at all. It was a chance to finally give truth a voice, to turn grief into purpose. The hospital wasn't just ruins anymore. To James, it was a mission, one that could honor the fallen by healing the living. The following weeks transformed James's life. Instead of sealing the hospital back in silence, he chose to restore it. Contractors were called in, the debris cleared, and light slowly returned to the darkened halls. What had once been a monument of secrecy and pain began to take shape as something new, a refuge. James announced his vision to the town. The hospital would reopen as a rehabilitation center for veterans, a place of healing instead of suffering. The same locals who once mocked his inheritance now stood in awe as the building's purpose shifted.